Welcome to Rewilding Love. This season is with a couple on the brink of divorce.
This is episode number 25, an interview with Scott Kelly.
As a human race have kind of gone really far downstream and kind of getting tangled in symptomology.
Not all physical illness is cured, but I think there can always be the potential for incredible healing, not just on the physical level, but the mental and emotional levels too.
When we can slow down enough to be with the symptom, oftentimes we can hear something much deeper within ourselves.
In having this conversation with my wisdom, I suddenly realized, you know what, this has been for me. This has been a gift that has been given to me so that I can evolve and grow in consciousness.
So many of us, Rohini, don't even realize how sped up we are until we have the contrast.
We talk about how this understanding that informs our rewilding metaphor really transformed our relationship, but it really transformed my health too.
We can listen to our own butts.
The bigger the butt, the bigger the manure.
Because I do run around the house in high heels and a dress all the time.
Any relationship is a portal into expanded consciousness.
You were my portal to expanded consciousness, Angus.
You are listening to Rewilding Love with me, Angus Ross.
And me, Rohini Ross.
Rewilding Love is a podcast about relationships.
We believe that love never disappears completely in relationships. It can always be rewilded.
Listen in as we speak with our guests about how they share the understanding behind the rewilding metaphor in their work.
And how it has helped them in their relationships.
Relax and enjoy the show. So first and foremost, Scott is a very good friend of ours and we love him dearly. And it's always a blessing to sit down and talk with him. And how cool it is that we get to have this conversation with him today for our podcast. And I would say that Scott Kelly is a well-being expert. How would you describe him?
He is. He has had over 25 years of experience working in the field of health as a health coach, a mentor, and an integrative health practitioner, and he is the oracle on all things health in my mind.
Yes, he's the oracle of many things: nutritional health, gut health, brain health, physical health, even butt health, which will become more self-explanatory as you listen in to this podcast. And also an expert in consciousness, I would hasten to add.
Yes, state of mind coaching is the foundation for all of his programs, and he works with a wide range of people, professional athletes, couples, families, teams, corporations, individuals. I mean, across the board, he's done it. He's worked with them.
He sounds like a very busy man.
Yes. And in this episode, we also discuss your MS diagnosis, which had a pretty significant impact on your life. And I think also on the fact that we're even together because I met you probably only 4 years after you had that diagnosis.
Yeah, I guess that really changed the landscape for me. One, because I had an incurable disease. And two, because I'd met this woman who I think, if my memory serves me correct, delivered an ultimatum that if I didn't want to get married, we may as well part company.
What? I don't remember that.
Yeah, you definitely did that.
When did I give you that ultimatum?
Well, that's how I heard it anyway at the time.
Refresh my memory.
I think that you were not interested in sort of a relationship per se unless it has the caveat of marriage attached to it, is how I understood it. I understood things at the time.
I maybe said that I didn't want to be in relationship with you unless you were committed.
Well, I think that commitment involved marriage and probably children.
I don't remember any of this.
Well, I do.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that's the way I remember it, let's say. And I think apart from anything else, I was probably, to be completely transparent, I thought that it was extraordinary that you would want to marry someone who had a disease like this, because that was such a gamble for anyone to take. And it certainly felt like my life looked very uncertain in terms of the future and what it held. And I guess part of it for me was that, this is, I can't look a gift horse in the mouth. Sounds awful. And I'm being kind of trite about it. But I think that there was something terrifying about what the future held. And here is this extraordinary and amazing woman who wants to saddle her horse to my carriage. Is that the expression?
I don't know.
tie a horse to my carriage.
I don't know.
And I thought that this is not going to get much better than this. Even though I was probably scared stiff about getting married, period. So thank goodness those were the circumstances and those were the conditions. Otherwise, I might not be here today, married to this incredible person who I love dearly.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that at the time, which is probably a good thing. I would have felt like you were settling or something.
Right.
But I'm very grateful. It's been an amazing journey and continues to be an amazing journey with you. So
Yeah.
I just need to take a breath, feeling emotional. So in terms of this episode, the other thing that I think was really beautiful in terms of the exploration with Scott is the parallels between how he talks about health and how we talk about rewilding, and especially related to being open to all of our experience. And that when we look at rewilding and being connected and experiencing our true nature, we're not just talking about feeling blissed out and zen, we're talking about being open to the full range of human experience. And Scott, in terms of rewilding health, was talking about being open to the full range of health experience and seeing that it is all health and that it's all part of that intelligence behind life working through us.
Yeah. He's a certified rewilder.
Yes. All right, well, let's listen to Scott. Thank you, Scott. We are so grateful that you're with us here today, and we're really looking forward to exploring rewilding health with you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Scott, in terms of health, one of the reasons that we wanted to have this conversation with you is because we really love the broad nature of how you look at health, including not just the physical, but the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the way that I've heard you talk about is that you take us upstream to really look at what's behind the symptoms, what's behind even the thinking and the feelings. And so we'd love to hear you share more about what you see as the true source of health and see where this conversation takes us.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for such a low-hanging fruit kind of question to start off with.
They get harder as you go along.
I like the idea of going upstream through the rapids and the white water to the source, or I'm hoping it's all tranquil. I mean, take us there. And
yeah. Well, hopefully my answer will be as adventurous as your image. So my experience in health has really been kind of working in and around orthopedic health, joints, ligaments, tendons, migrated into natural health where we're working more with organs and systems, and then kind of expanding outside of that, as you were saying, Rohini, into the world of psychology and even physics and spirituality. And what I see so much of is that we as a human race have kind of gone really far downstream and kind of getting tangled in symptomology. And we get almost enamored with being able to label things. And what I started to see years ago was as soon as we label something, we kind of stop the process of it, not only in our own mind, but our own capacity to heal, because we hold it as a static thing, versus being able to see that everything that's happening in health in any given moment of time is in process. And the human nature, our human nature, is health and healing. And in fact, what the body always wants to do is rebalance itself. It's always in that process. And there are a number of ways that we all innocently kind of step in the way of that reorganization or that balancing of the human body or even the human mind and psychology. We simply step in the way with nutrition, with lifestyle, with relationships, with how we hold our own psychology and our thinking, and how we hold our own spirituality. And what I started to see more and more was that the more upstream we look, meaning we kind of step out of our symptoms and we see them more as something in process. We kind of move further upstream to what is the body inviting us to see versus how can I get rid of my symptom? It's a very, very different question, because most of us have been trained to be intolerant of pain, be intolerant of discomfort. Whereas what I see now is that anytime the body is expressing anything, it's really an invitation for us in some form or fashion, whether it's an invitation for us to rest, an invitation for us to change something in our lifestyle, an invitation for us to see something that we couldn't have otherwise seen without that symptomology. And so moving upstream is kind of moving to source. It's moving to a place where we are already whole. And it's moving to a place where we have not labeled anything. We're not holding anything in conceptual terms, but we're holding a space, or we're invited into a space where there's just possibility. And then we can emerge from that space and flow back downstream and seeing how our body wants to take that information and take it into a healing process. And so that really involves all of the wonderful things that have evolved in health and healing, whether it's biochemistry or physics or medicine or alternative health methods, spirituality, psychology. It's taking all of these things together, honoring them in a way, but most importantly, letting the intelligence from within help guide how those tools and how those things are leveraged in our process of being whole and healing along the journey.
I love that.
Yeah, I love the way that you talk about this in terms of being open. I think about the world of professional psychology, for one thing, in a sense that there is so much, and there are so many modalities out there that are all about labeling. And I remember hearing someone talk about this the other day, saying how that maybe that started in the 50s when they decided to put a manual together to document all the different conditions that are out there. And I think that maybe that has some value, but I don't know. You go and see a professional, they give you a label, and they're like, gee, thanks, I have a label now. I guess that explains why I am the way that I am. And then you identify with that condition. But how do you actually heal it? I don't know. In terms of the identification and the label, I think that the important thing in terms of what you're saying, or as a corollary here, is that back to source. You go back to this idea that you have innate mental health and well-being. You go back to the idea that you have physical health and well-being. I think that it's beautiful what you're saying about the universality of it all.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I agree, Angus. The challenge is that we've become we're comfortable with labels, and in fact, many of us feel more comfortable when we can label something, have a diagnosis or whatever, so that we can put it in a silo or put it in a category. But the question is, does it actually do anything for us? And versus, if we look at the process of anything, we'll see that it is always in a process of shifting and changing and in a place of ultimately moving towards health in most cases. And I'll give you a very simple example. A fever is a perfect example. A fever is a normal, natural process of the immune system, and it's actually part of the healing process. But most of us have been trained that fevers are not okay. And so we have these fever reducing measures. We have these fever reducing medications. And as soon as we or somebody we know has a fever, all of a sudden we're embracing, how do we get rid of the fever? Instead of recognizing that the body is naturally turning up the temperature in its own healing process. And that part of a cell-mediated immune response, part of helping us become more immune to the environment, is having a fever. Now, there is a time and a place, and a fever can get too high, it can get out of control. But for the most part, fevers are normal, natural, part of the healing process. And when we decide that normal, natural parts of our health experience are inconvenient, we immediately stop the process of true health. And I think, one of the things, in a very innocent way, we're trying to tame all of our health experiences rather than let them be as they are and let them show us something that we couldn't have otherwise seen. One thing that's so fascinating about fevers, just as an example, when children have fevers and they're revealing that they're ill, it causes the entire family unit to actually slow down, come together, embrace the child who is ill. For them, it creates an experience of bonding and connection that couldn't have otherwise happened. But in today's day and age, as soon as a child has fever, it's like, let's reduce the fever and I got to get back to work. I can't take any time off. And all of a sudden it's more of an inconvenience than anything. And so in a way, illness being normal, natural, and healthy is also an invitation for all of us to slow down to the speed of health, slow down to the speed of connection, slow down to the speed of relating, slow down to the speed of actually helping and serving someone else in need. And I think that we have lost that capacity in somehow, some way, in the spirit of living at a speed that is not really serving anybody at this point.
Yeah, I really hear what you're saying in terms of the health of all of it. And that's what we really look at in terms of the rewilding, is that, all of the human experience is part of the health. So all of the expressions that come through in the physical form, that's what I hear you saying, is all part of the health of the system. And rather than trying to adjust them, can we allow ourselves to hear what the message is, as you're saying, and then take that on board and see what does that mean in terms of our own wisdom guiding us.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying about how it's all in process, and that when we put a label on something, it's not so much, I'm maybe not quite as against labels as you are, in terms of, I see them sometimes as helpful and useful for describing certain things, but we don't want to identify with that as a stuck thing. Like a cold is a label, I have a cold, but that's a living, moving process that's happening in my body that's constantly changing and evolving. And so it's just a small catchphrase to kind of let you know what's going on, but it's not something that's really describing what's happening.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Rohini. And it's not so much about labeling things, it's more about identifying with the label.
Yes.
Right? Becoming the label itself.
Yeah.
And that's what creates that stuckness. I think even with symptoms, there's a message in symptoms. There's a message that wants to be revealed. And what I've really seen is that when we can slow down enough in our own mind, in our own experience, and be with the symptom itself, be with that symptom without it having to be any different than it is. When we can slow down enough to be with the symptom, oftentimes we can hear something much deeper within ourselves about life, about health, about healing, about ourselves. And it may not be about getting rid of the symptom. It's just a much grander invitation to life that the body is taking advantage of slowing us down enough so that we can see something, so that our own consciousness can expand around life. So symptoms are in many ways they're a gift. But like I was saying, I think we've really been trained to see them as inconvenience. And you go to any store, you look on the TV at any moment of time, and there's a this for that for any symptom that you can possibly imagine. And so are we doing ourselves justice by getting in the habit of numbing things? Or can we actually all become more alive and more vital by actually having the experience as it's happening, being connected with the experience as it's happening, and listening to the deeper invitation of the experience while it's happening? And that's really kind of what it is to go upstream for me.
I have a tendency to use this metaphor, and I flog it to death all the time, where I compare the game of life to being much like a computer game. Like, I have a few clients who are gamers, so they love this analogy or this metaphor. And I would like to think that if it were a game, and this is the way that I talk about it, it sounds a little bit esoteric, but I would like to think that if it were a game, that the purpose of this game would to grow and evolve in consciousness. So in terms of what you're saying, in the same way that in a computer game you would have all these clues, the clues are always there about how to get across that lake of alligators. So in a sense, there is a tendency to like panic and like, oh my goodness, I've got to get across this lake of alligators as quickly as possible so I can, I don't know, win the princess or whatever it is, whatever prize is on the other side. But in a sense, it's like I need to really slow down and just look for the clues, listen for the clues. And I feel like that's what you're saying in terms of our symptom, the symptoms that we may have. Those are just indicators. Those are just clues that are really just inviting us to listen to our physiology and our biology, and kind of figure out, how do we take that next step? How do we play this game on that level? And I feel that it's a really good way to look at health. It's a good way to look at our psychology. It's just to really use our senses to feel or listen or experience those clues. And that's a great vantage point from which to move forward. Instead, I think I think of my own journey with health. It's like there is a tendency to sort of panic and feel like, what am I going to do about this? And then, look for a way to identify it instead of like, just trying to sort of get quiet and see, what is this telling me? And quite often it is just to slow down. I think that for all my health issues over the years, it has been the greatest virtue that I've landed on it is always just to slow down, or is to go to bed and sleep it off or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's exacerbated their health challenge by slowing down.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like it's kind of a foundational step.
Yeah.
Is slowing down. I mean, in anything. I mean, I think no matter if we're talking about relationships or we're talking about important decisions that need to be made or whatever it is, slowing down is oftentimes the first invitation.
Yeah.
Slowing down and then listening deeply, listening beyond our thinking, listening beyond the judgments that we have about ourselves for getting sick in the first place, because that's oftentimes a problem for many of us. Slowing down enough so that we can be present to what is, so that we don't allow our symptoms to take us into the future and think, oh my gosh, this is what my future is going to look like. This is what it's going to mean for me. Because that's all just crazy thinking that goes on that has no truth to it. Because the truth of what's going on is the body is expressing something. It's creating an invitation, and we can be with it as it expresses itself. And it doesn't also mean passivity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're not talking about passivity. Like we're not talking about like sitting with your symptoms and not doing anything. Because oftentimes what we hear deeply from within is an invitation to go work with somebody, an invitation to go express something, an invitation to make a change in lifestyle, an invitation to go make a change in career, or whatever it might be. So it's not about passivity, it's about deeply listening, following, and then repeating.
Well, it's also, I was gonna say too, for me, and I can think that I have found myself in this situation where I have got sick and then I've gone to bed to rest per se, but my mind is still racing. My mind is still really sped up. I'm still experiencing anxiety and stress, and that has a really debilitating effect on my, on my physiology without question. And then I'm also thinking about my own journey, and I've spoken about this before, about being told that I had MS as a 28-year-old and living with that mantle for 12 years and feeling really scared of it. And thank goodness that I guess I had enough wisdom at my disposal to feel like, I want to investigate what's going on here. Because had I just rested on my laurels and just listened to what the so-called experts were telling me, that I had this incurable disease and I was going to just be in and out of remission for the rest of my life, that would have been a whole different story to me, listening to my intuition and kind of doing my own detective work and having moments where I would get settled and I would have insight and I would take the appropriate steps, which eventually led me along a path to remove my mercury fillings and then to find out later that it wasn't MS, that it was something called polyneuritis, which was as a direct result of mercury poisoning. And that was something that was diametrically opposed to the label that I had been given. And I found that under my own auspices. And that was me being open to other possibilities. But it's so easy to get stuck in the framework of how people view things in a certain way, certainly in the institutions that are out there. And I'm not in any way denigrating the medical establishment, but I am also feeling like there is a better way to approach it and be open-minded, and not be so not stick so strictly to the company line.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're sharing, Angus, because I think it really speaks to you're giving a diagnosis, or in other words, you were given a term of possibility, right? And you held it as a term of possibility. It was not a sentence. It wasn't a death sentence. It wasn't a diagnosis. It was really, for you and your own experience, it sounded like you held it as a term of possibility, leaving the door open to other possibilities.
Yeah.
And as soon as we leave that door open to other possibilities, we've already taken that step upstream and no longer identifying ourselves with a label or a concept, but leaving ourselves open to the fact that beyond this form, we are whole. And that wholeness can do the heavy lifting, not only for our own psychological well-being in the navigation of something that might be more serious or permanent in our physical form, but also in the navigation, the graceful movement of being able to navigate whatever health challenge is thrown our way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really moving from that space rather from that contracted, fearful space downstream and trying to navigate the world of health.
I think throughout that whole experience, I feel now, looking back in retrospect, I feel that there was this gravitational pull back to source. There was on some level an understanding of that there was hope and there was possibility. But I certainly felt like there was a lot of going back and forth in my own mind about the fact that I had been kind of given a prison sentence. That's the way it was tabled to me in one way. But my intuition was telling me, yeah, you know what, that just doesn't feel right. So that's where I found hope.
what I love about that, Angus, is that, again, it's even though someone, a highly educated individual or individuals provided a diagnosis, you still held the space for possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, it sounds more like you were open to the fact that there was something deeper in you trying to kind of tug at you or flirting with you, that you were willing to go flirt with as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is so vitally important, that we all have these deeper flirts within us. We all have these deeper tugs within us. And if we're up for a good flirt, we may find some real true possibility that we couldn't have otherwise seen.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not to say that I didn't, I had moments of panic where this is a guy who's highly educated and an authority, the likes of which that I can't even comprehend in terms of his field of expertise. So why wouldn't I take that at face value? And so there were moments where I got really caught up, but then there were moments where I would really settle. And I think it was in those moments that gravitational pull back to source is where I started to see possibility and hope and have insights too that helped me ultimately.
So cool.
As we're talking about this, it's making me think also about sort of my own health crises that have come up over the years. And I think one of the biggest ones was I wasn't seeing the relationship between sort of all of my stress, mental, emotional stress, and the impact that was having on my body. And that before, we talk about how this understanding that informs our rewilding metaphor really transformed our relationship, but it really transformed my health too. Because I would spend probably, 2 days a month in bed associated with my cycle, and I just, would be ill. And Angus would have to take over, which he didn't like. But I mean,
take over being Rohini.
No, you'd have to run the show.
I just run around the house in a dress and high heels.
Because I do run around the house in high heels and a dress all the time. Now I know your fantasies.
That's my wish, anyway.
Poor Angus. But what I thought was normal, in a sense, I was the opposite of Angus. I wasn't in possibility. I was like, this is what I have to deal with. There's nothing I can do about this, because I tried so many things over the years. It wasn't as if I hadn't done every alternative health treatment under the sun and nothing seemed to be working. But it wasn't working because it wasn't addressing what was really going on in terms of the amount of identification that I had with the anxious thinking that was going on. And so it didn't matter what supplements I was taking, what diet I was following, I was still identifying with all of that crazy thinking that was putting me in bed once a month. And what it took, and I think this often happens in health, not so much for me anymore, but it really took me to have a major crisis to get me to slow down, which ended up with me having to kind of have my ovary removed as an emergency surgery practically. And then I had 6 weeks to recover. And I noticed in that 6 weeks, I remember touching my shoulders after I'd been in bed for a couple of weeks going, oh, they're not like rocks anymore. It's actually relaxed in there. And life, I couldn't do anything because I was recovering from major surgery. So I had to surrender, and life went on. Everyone survived. And I hadn't realized the depth of the misunderstanding that I had been living under. And that saying, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I had been living in that misunderstanding as if that was true. And it was taking a tremendous toll on my health, but I had no idea. I hadn't been able to put the two together. And I'm sure you see this all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really points to there's intelligence behind everything. We may not see it that way. We may see it as pain and discomfort and inconvenience, but there must be intelligence behind everything. But I love what you said when you said the word supplement. I got a chuckle because supplements, that's what they are. They're there to supplement a lifestyle, right? They're there to supplement nutrition. They're not the primary source, they're a supplemental source. And if we don't have a terrain that is able to receive that supplement, because that terrain is physiologically so kind of tense and in turmoil, then it doesn't matter what you throw in there. Your experience will be the same. But what I also hear in what you're sharing, Rohini, is that you were able to see beyond, okay, no matter what I put in, it's not going to be helpful. There must be something deeper here, and surrendering to that. And that's what I think is so valuable for all of us, is that life is always providing opportunities for us to see something more that we couldn't otherwise see without the experience. We are not philosophical creatures, right? We don't work well in philosophy. We work much better in experiential learning, right? Unfortunately, it can be very painful and uncomfortable. But the reality of it is that we learn so much more from a place of experiential learning and reflection. And if we can do more, get more, allow ourselves to be in life and reflect, and be in life and reflect, our spiritual trust of life grows, as we can start to see more and more, oh my gosh, life had my back there too. Even though it looked like it, I can now know that life has my back there too.
And I think there's also a really key distinction that I make between healing and a cure, because not all physical illness is cured.
That's right.
But I think there can always be the potential for incredible healing, not just on the physical level, but the mental and emotional levels too. And when we're open to that healing, sometimes that does coincide with the physical healing as well, but not always. But the cure, I think often when there's a label, it's like, well, how do I cure this label? When it's like, oh, here's, like you're saying, Scott, here's the invitation. What's it an invitation to? What am I going to open up to in terms of the deeper healing? And that's what I experienced as part of that journey that I had with endometriosis, was that there was a deeper healing available to me that wasn't necessarily a cure for that, but that had me be able to live life fully and vibrantly with one ovary rather than two, but oh well. From that experience, I really, on that experiential learning curve that you're talking about, Scott, I knew, because I had the contrast to how my body felt, how I felt emotionally, how I felt mentally when I slowed down, something that Angus had been probably telling me to do for a very long time. He's always right. but it wasn't even that I didn't agree with him. I didn't see that it was possible. I just didn't know how to slow down. Like, it was really innocent. It was so invisible to me how caught up I was. And so it wasn't until I was sort of forced to slow down and really got into a much more settled place that then I could see, like, oh, this is so much of it is just how driven I am in my mind and how I'm pushing myself and how hard I am on myself. And no wonder I've been feeling this level of stress. It actually isn't about everything else going on outside of me. It's been how I've been living in my own mind with myself. That's the source of it in terms of the stress. And that there's a greater source of well-being and wisdom that's available to me when I'm not caught up in that merry-go-round of it.
Yeah, and probably in a really helpful way, knowing that distinction, kind of getting like those little flirts of symptoms that kind of pop up. You start to know when you're kind of bumping up against your guardrails, right? And okay, well, now I got to take my foot off the accelerator, and kind of go into like slow down mode or however it looks for you. But I think that, so many of us, Rohini, don't even realize how sped up we are until we have the contrast. And I reflect on vacations that I've taken in the past, and there's something magical for me that happens around day 4 of vacation, and like I just kind of drop a level of and my mind opens up in a whole nother way. My heart opens up in a whole nother way. My physiology relaxes. And there's something about just the beauty of life just kind of starts to take the wheel for me. And I think, wow, I had no idea that I was this far away from it until I slowed down enough. And I think oftentimes about how many people never allow themselves to slow down that much. Like it becomes a threat. They have to work at a certain RPM, and if they get down at a level that becomes threatening, they just kind of wind themselves back up again. But yeah, there is such a wonderful gift in not only the gift of slowing down, but in that process of listening deeper. But I also really, really appreciate what you said about the distinction between healing and cure. I think it's so important, because we oftentimes think that as soon as we don't have a symptom that we're cured. But the reality of it is there are plenty of things that take our symptoms away. There are plenty of medications that take our symptoms away, but it doesn't mean that we're healed. And from a deeper perspective, we can become healed and become whole again, even faced with the symptoms or the challenge that we have. And it's much more about where we're identifying. Are we identified with the form of our physical body and our capacities and our abilities and what makes us physically unique? Or have we opened ourselves up to identifying with the deeper part of ourselves that is untouchable and unconditional? And the more we can kind of place our value there or see ourselves in that space, the more we can see the natural flux and flow of the physical form. You know, it gets bumps and bruises and banged up, and sometimes those things don't have enough time on this planet to heal. But our capacity to be with them and accept them and surrender to them and with them gives us the capacity to relate to them in a way that sometimes we just don't allow ourselves to, because of where our identity is placed. It's placed on, this thing needs to go away in order for me to be okay.
Yeah. Instead of, this experience allows me to awaken and open in consciousness.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. It's a much bigger invitation on board.
Yeah. Much richer one too.
Much richer one.
And often when that invitation is accepted, like in your experience, Angus, healing is available, and there is an outcome that is not necessarily one that's expected by the traditional medical establishment.
That's right. Yeah, you're just an outlier. But the reality of it is you're not really an outlier as much as you're just an expression of something that is normal but not common.
Yeah. And I love what you just said. I think, that was what was profound ultimately about that experience for me, because that's what did come out of it in terms of where I got to with my understanding that this was for my growth and upliftment in terms of whatever level of consciousness I got to. I certainly feel like I went through a long journey and I learned an awful lot from it. But ultimately I feel like, hopefully I got to a new level of understanding and awareness as a result of coming out the other side, and trusting my intuition throughout it all. And, there is a story to tell around, doing the Gestalt. I did a Gestalt. I don't know if I've told you this story, Scott, but I was in a men's group at a point where I had my mercury fillings removed, and I thought that was probably a great thing for me to do. But then I had what looked like the onset of a new episode where I woke up in the middle of the night and my arm was really numb, which would be typically how things would begin. So I guess I had a very restless night, and probably you got woken up by me fidgeting around, and then you asked me what was going on, and I explained to you, and unbeknownst to me, you had spoken to the person that you were working with at that point, and they had suggested that I go and see this guy who's a specialist in biofeedback, and you made this appointment for me. Anyway, between that point and me going to see that specialist, I had a men's group which I had to attend, and I explained what was going on, and the guy that was facilitating that particular men's group asked if I would do this process with him. And now looking back, I can understand it was a Gestalt technique, and I know that a lot of what we talk about is perhaps suggesting that we want to shy away from technique, or technique is one of those things. Is you can't apply it in a very cookie cutter way. It's very much an individualistic thing. But nevertheless, I did the Gestalt. But what I realized that I was doing, which is what he was inviting me to do, was have a conversation with God. And in retrospect, what I realized what was happening is I was actually having a conversation with my wisdom. And that's what came out of that whole conversation, was that for years and years I had been really petrified of this disease and what it could do to me. But in having this conversation with my wisdom, I suddenly realized, you know what, this has been for me. This has been a gift that has been given to me so that I can evolve and grow in consciousness. And at that point, kind of hearing that from within me, and it sounds kind of so sort of esoteric in a way saying it out loud, but hearing that for me, that was a point where for 12 years where I had been really scared. Suddenly, I suddenly felt, okay, I'm okay with the fact that I have this label, that I have this disease. It's been for my growth and development. And in that moment, that was a real massive insight, and I broke down in floods of tears, but I felt fundamentally okay on those terms, and that I might not survive, and that I might become a paraplegic, but if this is for my growth and development on that level, then I can come to terms with that, and I did. And it was the first time in 12 years where I just let go all that suffering and all that anxiety. So what you just said is like, for me, that makes sense. And what you're saying too is that, sometimes we can be ravaged by disease, and it can look very difficult and involve a lot of suffering, but there's still that possibility that there's something to learn from it. Yeah. And I certainly felt like I had that experience firsthand.
And that experience was the healing.
Yeah.
And you were healed whether or not you had that disease, whether or not you had the outcome. To me, that's what's so profound, is that the healing is not about whether you can walk or not. The healing is that inner experience of innate health and well-being that isn't attached to the form having to be a certain way.
Yeah. And the big miracle of it all was that when I went and saw the specialist, I guess 48 hours later from waking up in the middle of the night, he tells me that I don't have MS and that I have polyneuritis, which is an altogether treatable condition brought on by mercury poisoning in my case.
And you had tennis elbow, that's why your arm
And
was
I had
numb.
tennis elbow, and that's why my arm was numb from working too many hours on the computer.
Oh, it was computer elbow.
Computer elbow. It sounds much better, tennis elbow.
That is such a perfect representation of what we're pointing to, and the fact that you could see that for yourself. Health and our experience of health is just it's the expansion of consciousness, and that's what I really feel like is that's the invitation of any sort of physical health challenge we have. Is it's an invitation to expanded consciousness. Moment to moment, whatever is on invitation, it's inviting us to see something more for our own benefit, so that we're not tied to this identity, but committed to something that is much, much larger, and not dependent on how well this is functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where true freedom resides. And it doesn't mean that we don't take our best shot at healing in the physical space. It just means that we take the pressure off so that true healing can actually happen at that deeper level, and then free up the physiology so that it has more flexibility and resilience in it. Trying to heal in a stressed out space is very difficult for the body. But if we can kind of go upstream far enough to really truly get a sense of our true nature, our essence, then we free up our physiology so that it has much more flexibility to do the job that it's designed to do, not from a place of being contracted and bound, but from a place of being flexible and resilient and open to pure possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my mind, it's like it's kind of like the first step is, let's begin healing by going upstream. But it's that one's not accepted quite well yet.
Well, isn't it amazing that, you know, that you're talking about this in as far as health is concerned? And obviously health would be one of the most significant challenges that we can bump up against, that would make it hard to see it on those terms. But going back to this idea of the game of life, is like, yeah, it's those challenges, whatever they are, whether they're with health or with our career or whatever it's, or you know our kids, who you name it. That's where we grow and learn, and to see it from that vantage point allows us to really kind of let go of the controls and surrender to this idea, is that, you know what, I'm set up for success here. I'm being delivered a teaching point, and there's something for me to learn. I don't know what it is, but if I can approach it from that vantage point, then that's a whole lot easier to take on board than just being, here are these conditions and here's this experience, and you're kind of stuck and you kind of fold your arms and lie down or whatever you do. It's kind of like, that's where you suffer.
Well, it's so funny you say that, Angus, because it's not, because the invitation could be into any realm of life. You know, I back in the mid 90s, I was working in a physical therapy center, and I had injured my knee, and I had to have knee surgery, and it was supposed to be an in and out deal where I'd be back on my feet in 4 days, back at work probably in 7. But after the surgery, they saw an opportunity to do a different technique, which made it so that I was non-weight bearing for 6 weeks.
They sawed your leg off.
They sawed my leg off.
Let's try out this technique.
Yeah, it was really new at the time. They don't use it anymore. So, but what was interesting is so I was at home for a good 5 or 6 weeks. And in that time period, kind of like you, Rohini, like I slowed down. I kept slowing down and slowing down. And then new insights, new ideas, new kind of invitations about purpose and passion started to come through that I had stopped entertaining. And as they kind of represented themselves, I felt this true energy behind them, and I got really excited. And I started to kind of follow what they were pointing to. And you know, the next thing I know is I go back to work 5 or 6 weeks later, only to give my resignation, because what I really saw was I wanted to go in a different direction. And once I went in that direction, I could literally just feel like, almost like my own inner wisdom and intelligence was cheering for me. It was like, and it was at that point I realized, wow, you know, there are no mistakes. The only mistake is the one that we, when we stop listening, the one where we think we know better. But when we truly deeply listen and follow, man, it's a wonderful gift in so many areas, in all areas of life. And at the same time, all areas of life can create a level of thinking that creates a turmoil within us, right? That creates a health opportunity. So it's all connected. It's it's just all wisdom playing this game of the Matrix, I guess.
Yeah.
We can't mess it up.
Can't mess it up.
And we all kind of know this too, don't we? Deep down, on some level, we have this understanding, I think, that we just get distracted basically because of the speed of life.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I was thinking when the kids used to watch that TV show, Dora the Explorer.
Yes.
Find the map. or was there another one called Blue's Clues? It's
There
kinda
was
like,
Blue's Clues.
the clues are always there. You know, all we need to do is just, like you say, slow down and listen or look for them.
Yeah.
But we get so caught up in the speed of life, rushing from A to B.
And one of the biggest clues is when we use the word but.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, you know, I would totally do this, but. And, you know, an old mentor of mine told me, he's like, you know, always look for the but, because that's where the manure starts coming out. and you know, it's really funny when you really reflect on that. After but, you start to hear all of our excuses were just full of shit.
Yeah. The bigger the butt, the bigger the manure. I had to.
Yeah, too. He lost his train of thought.
Oh, sorry,
now.
Scott.
No, but I think even if we can listen to our own butts. Right back at you, pal. When we listen to our own butts and we can become aware of our own butts, we can start to know that's a clue, right? that when we say but, we're denying our own wisdom.
You can be able to pull it together.
Well, more so for you, I think. Well, I was just thinking the next time I might flatulate, I say, look, there's another clue.
There's another. This guy is full of clues.
Yeah, the new TV show will be Pooh's Clues. It's really gone downhill now.
Let's reel it back in here. But that is really true. Like, as I'm listening to you say that, talking about the word but, I hear that all the time with clients, that what is said after that is how they sort of stand for their limitation, how they're advocating for their limitation, but innocently not seeing that. I'm feeling like we need to have, you know how on those pharmaceutical commercials or those financial ads where they say it really, really fast. Like, we need to have a disclaimer. Like, if you're looking in the direction of rewilding, watch out, because your health might get rewilded. Your
Right.
work might change. Who knows what's going to happen?
That's right.
Yeah. But I love how you are looking in the direction of health, but really saying exactly the same thing that we're saying. And there may be different modalities involved with health and when we're working with couples, but it's getting to that place of experiencing your source, experiencing your true nature, and allowing yourself to be transformed by that.
Yeah, I really, truly believe that no matter what we're looking at, they are all portals into expanded consciousness. Like, any relationship is a portal into expanded consciousness. Any health challenge, any lifestyle challenge, any work and career challenge is literally it's a portal. It's the one that speaks to you, right? Because not all portals speak to everybody,
Right.
right? So that's why we have an unlimited number of portals.
You were my portal to expanded consciousness, Angus. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great.
I'm the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes, you do. You do. Oh, that's beautiful, Scott. Is there anything that we haven't covered today that you think would be good to cover?
Now we got the butt jokes out of the way.
Yeah, that was an unexpected topic. I could say one thing about the invitation of this pandemic, and from my perspective, that I think is oftentimes overlooked, and I think not spoken about at all. And that is the invitation for us to get back to nature. When we look at the nature of virus, when we look at the nature of illness, when we look at the nature of what nature provides for us through food and nutrition, and how we are literally designed to work from the intelligence of the soil, and that the makeup of the soil is very, very familiar to the makeup of the microbial makeup of our own gut, where our immune system is housed. And we look at how commercial farming, for example, how aligned is that with nature? Or is it aligned more with chemistry? And how much of our life and lifestyle is aligned more with nature? And if we're finding that we're living in a place of fear of illness, fear of getting sick, fear of COVID, fear of virus. Virus is not going away. Virus has been on the planet long before we arrived and has actually helped the evolution of human beings. But we've lost that trust in nature. We've lost that ability to see and try and understand that. And one of the things I oftentimes say is, we try and control that which we don't understand. It's a much faster way to do it. Instead of slowing down and understanding something, we try and figure out how to control it. We do that with our own mates, right? But if this pandemic has offered an invitation for me, it has been to, 1, slow down to the speed of life. 2, as much as I can, in as many places as I can, invite nature to be my teacher. Invite nature into my body. Invite the sun into my body, because one of the most powerful things that we all have is the sun and its relationship to creating and generating vitamin D in our body, which makes us far more resilient in the face of virus. To living and eating in a clean way, so that when this system comes in contact with something that a bacteria, some infectious disease, or whatever it is, this system is as strong as it can, and clean as it can be, so that it doesn't have to work through abundance of toxins. And I think that's really, for me, I wish there was more talk about that in our main media channels, about the invitation of us all to slow down. We know the profile of people who are getting sick, and that is very clear. And the vast majority of those challenges are coming to people who have significant lifestyle issues. And if we could all kind of look in a direction of reconnecting with health, reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with what's truly our birth-given right, and slowing down to the speed of nature and letting it be our great teacher, we might actually be able to accept virus into our life without fear. And most importantly, be able to get sick without having death. And I think that's all I wanted to share about that.
That's really beautiful, Scott. And I think that it has been a year of remembering that. And for me, the slowing down has been a significant part of this year. And as things are opening up more, looking at what's my intentionality going to be as there's more choice available, and how to maintain sort of the upside of what's been going on in terms of the connection, the family connection, the quality time together. Like, there's been a lot of really beautiful things that we've experienced as part of this required slowdown.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Wonderful.
It has, as always.
Yes.
It's been great to hang out. Love it.
Love hearing your wisdom.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to Rewilding Love. If you enjoyed this podcast, Please let us know by subscribing on iTunes, and we would love for you to leave a review there.
iTunes reviews will steer people to this podcast who need help with their relationships.
If you would like to learn more about our work and our online Rewilding community, please visit our website, therewilders.org.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week.